Welcome back to another episode of Growth Stories. I'm your host, Ben Landers. This is the show where we interview business owners, entrepreneurs, and industry leaders who have successfully grown and scaled their companies to amazing heights and who will share insights to help you do the same thing. My guest today is a very special guest, someone who has had a profound impact on Blue Corona, as well as my personal and professional life, Vistage Chair, Peter Schwartz. Peter's not just any Vistage chair. He's a master chair, a best practices chair. He's won just about every award that Vistage offers. If you're not familiar with Vistage, Peter will introduce it in the episode, and so I'll leave that to him. But I can think of no one better. If you're a business owner who's trying to grow and scale your company from, say, $5 million to 30 million and beyond, I can think of no one better to learn from than Peter, because Peter has ridden shotgun with nearly 400 business owners who have done that. And so he knows all about the challenges of scale, the way your mindset has to change as you grow, the common missteps, pitfalls, bottlenecks, all that kind of stuff. And so no matter where you are in your business journey, you're going to learn a lot from this episode. So enjoy. Peter, welcome to Growth Stories. It's great to have you.
Thank you, Ben. Glad to be here.
Well, for the audience, I know you obviously very well, but for the audience, give everyone an introduction.
Peter Schwartz. I'm a Vistage Chair. For those of you that haven't heard of Vistage, it's a CEO peer group. So imagine 16 non-competing CEOs who get together once a month in a confidential environment. Confidentiality is key to this, for the sole purpose of helping each other get the business to the next level and their leadership to the next level. So I've been running Vistage groups for 17 years, and colloquially, I'd say I help leaders get better results on less stress. So that's what I do.
I'm a Vistage member. That's how I know Peter. And I was a Vistage speaker for years. So I've traveled all around the country, talking to Vistage groups about digital competitive analysis. And so I've had the privilege of meeting, 100 different Vistage chairs. And I think, Peter is not just a Vistage chair, but he's, in the elite. All the Vistage chairs are really impressive. But again, there are some that have been doing it for a long time. And clearly it's sort of their calling. So Peter you're a master chair and a best practices chair, and you've won all sorts of awards. And
well, here's the thing. If you love what you do, then getting good at it just is natural. So it's just been a labor of love for the past 16 years.
Well, I can, I've been in Vistage, I think, since 2016, and Peter has been my chair the bulk of that time. And it's clear that you love what you do. And, I wouldn't be where I am without, your help and the help of the group, really, as well.
Yeah. I mean,
thank you for that.
You guys, the small business owner is the hero of the American economy, and the Wall Street Journal you'll never see an article about what small businesses do to keep the business afloat, to save their best employees. These are heroic stories, and I just get to be a witness to all that.
I love that. And that's really the premise of, with Blue Corona and who we, serve, why we do what we do. That's the exact, sort of mindset that we have as well. Yeah. So I guess maybe talk about who, again, for the audience, some will be familiar with Vistage, probably some are in Vistage and some aren't. So what type of company or what type of leader joins Vistage?
Well, it could be a number of circumstances. But right now, what I'm seeing is a lot of generational handoffs. So the first generation, the founding generation, is handing the business off to the second, this transition. And that's a very complex thing, as you can imagine. So that's an ideal Vistage candidate, is either the owner, the founder, wanting to be in a group to get that transition right, or the person getting the business coming up to speed on how to run a business, preserving the founder's legacy, but bringing their voice to it. So that is very complex, and we're seeing a lot of that right now.
Well, I was going to say, don't you get, I think I remember in speaking with groups, don't you get a fair number where one of the parents, let's just say the father, will join Vistage and then have his son, daughter, join another group with the same chair?
Yeah, so there's chief executive groups, the one you're in, Ben. There's a level below that. It's called the key executive group. And so that is true. A lot of my CEOs will have a person from their organization, a leader, senior leader in a key executive group. And now we can go 3 levels deep. We have programs for emerging leaders. So really, we're a leadership development platform that centers on the growth of the business while paying attention simultaneously to the growth of the leader. And as you know, leaders have to be growing at a pace that matches or exceeds the pace of the business complexity, and not just the CEO, but 2 or 3 levels deep, or the business will struggle. That's the key to this, is growing the leadership.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've noticed with, we have a lot of clients where it's again a family business, and I think that the ones that I've seen really thrive, the patriarch of the situation really understands how intentional they have to be, their weaknesses at preparing their kids to take over the business, and the need for outside help.
And almost always, since the founder, that's the business is their child. It is very difficult for them to let go of control. So that transition from I'm running the thing to now my son or daughter's running the thing, and getting your ego out of it, it's rigorous, man. It's tough to...
Yeah, I've seen the ones where, we'll have a client where they say, my son is going to be running the company. So, I engaged you, but you're going to be working mostly with him. And then I sort of watch sometimes the helicopter,
Oh, man. And it's very frustrating for the younger generation because, they're generally pretty bright. They've been in the business for a while, most of them, and they have clear ideas about how they want to build on the legacy of the founder. That's why I have a job. It's enormous fun, but very complex. So
I know Vistage members will come from every industry, and I've met folks from, less than, about $1 million in revenue all the way through, hundreds of millions. But it strikes me as a lot of the Vistage folks, are between, have grown from like the $5 and $10 million range to 30 million plus. And I know that was one of the things that attracted me, sort of to your group. So you've worked with probably hundreds of people in that fit that characteristic over the years.
373 to be exact.
Not that anyone's counting.
I keep a tab how many CEOs I've worked with in the 17 years. So
well, so you've had this, everyone who's run a business has perspective and on sort of the challenges those folks go through. But I feel like you have a unique perspective because of the number that you've interacted with, and you're sort of riding shotgun, to these folks as like a business coach, basically. So I guess what are some of the common challenges that folks going from 5 to 10, what has to change when you're sort of in that 5 to 10 range, and maybe you've hit some bottlenecks to get to 30 and beyond in revenue?
5 million seems to be the magic number, give or take, but it's usually 5. And what happens there is particularly at 5 million, what the owner begins to realize is the informal processes that we used to have, the hallway chatter about how the day's going, isn't working anymore. As we scale and grow, the business becomes more complex, and what's required is we have to formalize systems and processes. And that's it's a rigorous thing. Business owners have never done it before, particularly the startups, and they just want to find a way to leverage the experience of others to do it with less friction. So that's the first growth gate, is to begin to recognize that, if we're going to scale this thing, we have to formalize systems and processes while maintaining the culture. That's always a big fear. Will I lose the secret sauce if I start to formalize some things? And it's complex. And then the second growth gate is usually around 10 or $11 million. And again, it's the systems and processes that got me to 10 won't get me to 20. And it's a reinvention of all that. So the idea is for the CEO to be willing to let go of what worked before, because what's going to be required to go forward is going to be new.
I think there's a common misconception that formalizing and standardizing somehow means that you won't have that sort of family, small team vibe. I know as we formalized things at Blue Corona, we didn't lose that stuff. We, had a handful of people over the years that said, this is different. than the company that I joined. But, you know, if you really looked at it, it was different and objectively better. And we still had that, you know, that esprit de corps.
Well, that's an interesting observation. I think that you improved the organizational design because you saw that the way we get the work done around here is going to have to evolve in the way that the business is structured. Inevitably, some folks that are with you from the start won't be able to make that adjustment, and that's sad, but they need to be somewhere else if they can't catch up and keep up.
Yeah. You mentioned, you know, again, I was in a Vistage small business group. So that would be for companies that are really small. And then, you know, I really started to become where I felt like I was sort of outgrowing that group. And that's what led me to the group that that you lead, one of the groups that you lead. And I remember, you know, sort of an initial sit down with you, kind of a meet and greet. And you mentioned that one of the things that I'd have to consider or be willing to do was moving from, I think you called it a loyalty-based culture to a performance-based culture. Can you talk a little bit about that and what you meant by that?
Yeah, that is, again, in all the CEOs I've worked with that grew the business, that was a transition that they had to go through. And that goes back to the formalization of systems and processes that I talked about, that, you know, more discipline in the way that we execute around here. And, you know, in the early days, people are working 12, 14-hour days to get it done, and you value that. And you may bonus it or, you know, whatever it is, but at some point, it's not the absence of loyalty. The conversation shifts to what the success and the role look like. And the conversation needs to be more about high performance and opportunity, that if you do this for the company, then here's your growth path inside the company. And that needs to be formalized.
Yeah, that I remember, you know, I think I had to make that shift from, you know, sort of chief doer or feeling like, you know, I'm sort of action oriented. So I was always kind of jumping in and doing. And I think one of the things that you encouraged me to do was less doing and more asking questions and getting really curious. What does excellence look like at 30 million? How does the organization need to be structured to perform at 30 million? What do these roles look like?
I mean, as you scale the business, the nature of the questions that you need to be asking changes. And so there you go. And what you realize that I'm going to have to make sure I guard my time with respect to strategic thinking. And that's imagining the business 5 years from now. Is there something
that, I mean, again, a lot of this stuff, I remember reading it, you know, hearing it, and in one sense, it all sounds so simple. But in reality, it can be hard to transition, you know, to where you're asking questions and you're kind of stepping back. What are there character traits, I guess, in the people that you see successfully growing like that as a leader, and maybe contrast that with what are the traits that people who get stuck?
Character traits, I'm going to frame it a little differently. I think for businesses, there's an inner game and an outer game. The outer game are the skills and knowledge. It could be industry specific. And that's important. You need to be growing your outer game skills all the time. But really what runs the show is the inner game. That's your mental belief system. It's your attitudes. It's your memories of past events that are shaping how you show up today. That inner game needs to evolve. And so, you know, and that's really where all the science of leadership development has focused since Jim Collins wrote Good to Great, by the way. What level 5 is largely an inner game evolution, a more complex mind that handles more complex problems. And as the business scales, it gets increasingly complex. So that's kind of how I would answer that, is 2 games the CEO has to master, the inner game and the outer game. And then the other thing I would add to that is all business leaders wrestle with 2 types of leadership challenges: technical challenges, that's the bigger, better, faster, cheaper thing, and adaptive challenges. And an adaptive challenge is the requirement to solve for a problem where no solutions seem to exist. COVID was full of adaptive challenges. Pre-COVID, I would say 60% or 70% of the CEOs I ever worked with did not believe work could get done remotely. And look what happened.
Yeah, that was really an experience. And, you know, as you were talking through that, I was thinking about, you know, how much I've learned over the years listening to, you know, other members of the group how when they're starting to lay out an issue or a challenge, you know, I have this natural tendency to think that I know where they're going to take it, you know, that this is the issue that they're struggling with. And it's almost like I feel like I could complete the sentence. And then what I would find is that what came out of their mouths next, or the question that they were asking surrounding it, was completely different than the one that I had in my head. And at those moments, I thought, I better just shut up, you know, and listen, because here's someone who is got a completely different set of experiences and, you know, picture in their head than what I do.
Well, you've heard me say this before. At the level you play at, an attitude of curiosity is more beneficial than not.
Yeah, that's a, you know, I think that's, again, something that I know I've struggled with, but it's, and I, you know, and I think a lot of business owners struggle with it. It's hard when you go from small business where everyone's looking to you as having all the answers, to then where you're trying to draw it out of the team. But if you can't, you get stuck.
Yeah, and the perception is that's time consuming, and it may take a few seconds more in that interaction to stay curious and ask good questions, but inevitably what you get is better information to make better decisions.
How do you, I guess maybe talk just for a second, we've sort of covered this indirectly, but the Vistage Chair's role, you know, so how you get the group together, how you assemble the group, you know, how, I don't know, the Vistage Chair's kind of role in helping the business owner level up.
Well, I view myself as a participatory companion. I just walk side by side with a business owner. And since I've walked a lot of this terrain before in my previous career, I can offer career advice, but my job, or professional advice, my job is to ask the right question. My job is, I'm in the question business, Ben. You know, and the group is in the question business. So in our one-to-ones, my job is to surface the thing that matters most, and then to also try and identify what might be interfering. And a lot of times, through experience that you're familiar with, I'll say, you know what, Ben, why don't you bring that to the group's attention and let's get some eyes on it in the issue or opportunity processing segment of the day, which, as you know, is a very structured way for the group to go after a problem for the benefit of the member and first get curious. The whole idea is to understand the nature of the problem. And what you've seen time and time again is somebody will bring an issue to the group and we start getting curious about it. And all of a sudden they realize, well, you know, it's not that at all. It's actually this thing over here. And once they have that clarity, then we can offer solutions. And the solution almost always becomes self-evident. And then there's the execution piece. And any number of things could get in the way of that, but that's what they know they need to do. Yeah. So my job in between a meeting is also to be the accountability partner. You know, you have this big thing coming up. It could be the termination of a long-term employee that we all struggle with because we love these people, but they're not getting it done. Yeah. And you know, my younger groups would take 4 or 5 months to fire that person. A good high-performing group, you can do it in between meetings, which is the idea.
Wow. You know, it's amazing how you know, there are these core issues, and then there's a lot of noise, you know, surrounding it. And again, I think the same thing I noticed in the small business group that I was in. I felt like we spent a disproportionate amount of time sort of talking about things that were just, in the grand scheme of things, you know, just noise, little teeny stuff. In the larger group, the group gets right to those big hairy things, and we sort of not joke about the small stuff, but the small stuff is like those problems and challenges are always there.
Yeah.
That's like par for the, you know, so just you show up with it, you know?
Well, I mean, the high performing groups hold each other accountable too, and they support each other offline. I mean, it's a really wonderful thing for me to watch 16 people support each other. And you've been through, you have had some challenges up to now, and then you've seen some enormous challenges from group members. Yeah. And it's unbelievable what the small business owner has to wrestle with to get the business to succeed.
It's also been inspiring, you know, again, having folks like seeing the enormity of some of the challenges that folks are facing. And then sort of, you know, like you kind of mentioned how you're sort of walking with someone through it. You know, as a member of a group, you're kind of cheering on these folks experiencing these things and watching them overcome, you know, certain challenges, then gives you a lot of confidence that, that you can do it when you face one of those challenges.
Yeah, I've never seen an issue that a member brings or an opportunity that a member brings to the group that doesn't resonate with everybody in the room.
Yeah.
Everybody benefits from someone else's challenge. They'll spot it in themselves. It's just valuable to get these things talked about. And what's even more fun is the following month when a member comes back in and say, here's what I tried out, here's what I learned. And that is just, that really energizes the group to see a person in motion.
I have two more things, and then I'll sort of ask you what you're working on now and how folks can get in touch with you. But one thing that I think it's not new anymore to Vistage, but I still feel like it's underutilized, which is my Vistage, what they've done with the website. And now you've got your local group, and you've got your chair, and then you've got the larger, sort of regional network. Before COVID, we used to have events where they'd have speakers and you'd meet Vistage members and other groups. But my Vistage has got, networks by industry. And I've used some of that stuff. There's like a digital marketing, group where I could go in and basically, sort of ask. And now some of these folks are now competitors because they're across, they're in other groups, but you share what you're comfortable sharing. And I got tons of value out of that, but I don't hear that as much. Do you feel like that's picking up speed?
Well, networks, these kind of affinity groups that members can join virtually for industry specific type of support and knowledge is a very popular program in our offering right now. Most of my members are part of networks, and more than once. The website, as you're testifying to, is content rich. We have a full-time learning and development department, and an ex-Gartner guy who's our chief research officer, whose only job is to bring thought leadership to the community.
Yeah.
And we take that really seriously. And so we do. I'm really proud as a chair to be able to leverage that for the benefit of my members.
Yeah. I remember logging into it and being kind of blown away by how much it had been built out. A lot of times when stuff like that's launched, you see the potential value when there's content there. But with Vistage, when they launched it, it was preloaded with a ton.
Yeah. The other thing that I do, Ben, is when I sign a member, I always encourage them to view this as the company's membership, not just their membership. So that, if there's a speaker coming up that you think your HR lead would benefit from, bring somebody in to watch the speaker portion of the meeting. So I like for members to spread this around the organization. Lots of content that's useful for, different roles inside the organization.
Yeah. Well, and that was the second thing I was going to touch on. And I don't know that it's just, maybe there's a question there, but you bring in a speaker in our group. I think it's every once a month, right? Or what is it? A couple times a quarter?
9 times a year, 8 or 9 times a year.
And you seem to bring someone in based on recurring themes.
Yeah. Well, I think I'd love to know I was that brilliant. I book my speakers usually August or September of 22 for 23. And the timing is always some kind of, I don't know how that works, but it seems like whenever the speaker comes in, it's perfect timing. I can't take credit for that. I'm paying attention to what the group's themes are, and I try and book speakers to model that.
Yeah, I mean, that's been really helpful as well, listening, and I feel like a lot of, when I think about like the Blue Corona system and sort of how we run the business, it's really like an amalgam of the best ideas from the group, from you, from the speakers, right? And then you sort of put your own, it's like playing cover songs, and then all of a sudden you kind of come up with something new and say, all right, this is our system. We didn't invent the wheel, reinvent the wheel, but it is our own, it's our own paint job.
That's when I know I've done my job. It's not that I've removed all the problems you have to face. It's that I've removed some of the friction you have to face to address the problems.
Yeah, I really like that. The friction aspect, eliminating or reducing friction. What are what are some things that you're focused on right now or working on, and how can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more?
Peter.Schwartz at vistagechair.com, Peter.Schwartz at vistagechair.com. I have a LinkedIn page. I'm just growing the third level down. So I have 2 CEO groups, and I could always, I would love a few more construction trades in my Vistage groups. I've graduated a lot of them out. They've had exits, so I want to replace those folks. But my key group and my advancing leaders group that's my practice. And so if anybody is curious about how to bring leadership development into the organization in a structured way that's proven, let's just have a conversation.
And I'll put your contact information and links to your LinkedIn profile in the description when I post some of these things. And that's one other thing for folks listening, right now in the home service industry and the construction industry, there's a tremendous amount of acquisition, mergers and acquisitions activity going on. And I think that's another huge value of being in a group like this, because it gives you a platform, a forum, a place where you can share what's happening, what's going on in your head. And you're talking to people who have, in some cases, this is their second or third business. So the folks in your group are people that have already done it. And for those of you that are in some of these discussions now, man, it's a lonely, scary place, because you don't know who you can talk to and not, be in violation of your NDA or whatever it might be.
It's to sell the business it's challenging as heck, and it's an emotional roller coaster, and it's just a lot going on, and you want as much advice as you can to get through it without making a mistake.
Well, and I think in the construct of your group, not only do you want that advice, but you want it from people that you really trust, that you respect, that you admire, and that know your business, almost as if it were their business. And I think that makes it incredibly unique. And it's the kind of thing that you want in place, ideally, before you're confronted with a challenge like that or a decision like that. So Peter, this was really awesome. I really appreciate it. And I think for those listening, this is exactly the kind of, these are all the things that they're wrestling with. So I think this will be great.
Well, thank you, Ben. Great spending time with you virtually.
It's good to be back in person, but the convenience of
Zoom we've found a way for Zoom to be permanently in my professional life. So I'm happy about that, actually.
I think our group has done really well. I mean, again, it's always better being together, but when I was sitting in traffic coming back from Tyson's Corner the other day, bumper to bumper, I was like, Zoom can be
I think valuable. We're best in person, but virtual has found its way into our business model.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you for doing this.